Your life is a remarkable story and adventure that only you can create. May this chapter be a fully alive revolution for you as you love your life, your world, and your God. And our topic once again is what?
Adulthood, still with parents. We're in a series right now that is about unique relationships. And we're starting a series off looking at being an adult, but still living in the home of your parents. It's interesting that today the statistics say that 15% of all 25 to 35-year-olds still live with their parents.
And with this coronavirus going on, many have moved back with family for the community or for the reasons of corona. So that 15% is up a little higher even, isn't it?
It's gone past that for sure. That was before the virus hit. Hey, welcome everyone. If you've just come in, please in the chat, tell us where you're located right now. Where are you sitting? I mean, not like in a red chair under a blue sky.
If you want to put those details, you go for it.
Unless you're on a beach someplace watching the ocean. I would love to know that.
Yes, so thank you for checking in. Dale Potter is our first in the room in the chat space. Thank you for coming. Dale Potter, good afternoon. And thank you for joining us from Michigan. And we have Roseanne from the Netherlands. Woohoo! Welcome back. You're a regular with us now. I love that.
Neil
coming in for Portugal. You're over 50 and you don't live with your parents. But thank you for coming anyways. I'm sure you're going to grasp some nuggets.
Nadine's with us. Nadine is going to be one of our guests today on as she talks about living with her parents. So we look forward to that in just a few moments.
And Paulo's coming in from Portugal. Did you say his name already? That's awesome. Welcome in. I'm so glad you're here. Rian from South Africa. He was with us this morning. Whoop, whoop. And Rian, I don't know. Maybe you can just say, maybe no spoiler alerts, but it's worthwhile to come, obviously, because you're back. And we love that you're back. And
Evelyn is coming in from the country of Texas.
And Jacob Faulkner is way over from the other country of California.
Yeah. Zoe, welcome, Zoe.
Wait, Jacob is sitting on the floor with some popcorn.
Ooh, nice.
Jacob, take a picture of that. I love that you are coming ready for the entertainment, for the enjoyment to begin.
Almost every week during Duzie Live, someone sends us a picture of where they're sitting and their view of their computer.
We absolutely love it.
We love that. So.
Yeah, Zoe, you already said Zoe from the UK. Thanks for jumping in, Zoe. And Ely is coming in from the Netherlands. Tammy from West Africa, my sister.
Welcome.
Whoop, whoop. And Matthew Taylor coming in from Kent, UK. Thank you for joining us.
So we have people right now on that are in their morning still. We have some of you that are in their afternoon and some of you that are in your evening. This is amazing.
And Allie, you're coming from the UK. Thank you so much for jumping in and joining us. Illy says, congratulations, 34 years. Just want to have a shout out. Dan and I had celebrated our 30th.
Did you get the number?
Yeah.
Okay.
Our 34th year anniversary. Whoop, whoop. And that was on Sunday. And it was our international goal to get over, what was our goal number? 230?
I think it was last year I think we had 224. So it was to get to at least 225.
And we got to 394 last count so far this year. So woohoo!
And
we want to thank every one of you who ate an ice cream.
If you were
celebrated.
If you were one of those ones that you had an ice cream or something like an ice cream, in the comment, just put I see. Just ice cream. I see. Because I want to know who's here who actually celebrated. And how many was it altogether?
394 is my latest count.
Wow.
I didn't check today from the ones yesterday. That was my count as of last night.
I would like to count how many calories it is. They say in a normal scoop of ice cream, there's 140 calories. So you times that, wow, it'd be
somebody do the math
incredible.
Quick. What's 394 times 150 calories?
But the American scoops, I think, normally are a little bigger. So I think the calorie count will be a little higher.
Americans are generally bigger as well. Kitty Kapusta coming in from Poland. Jak się masz? Talk, yes, you're here. And Matt Taylor says that's a lot of ice cream. Okay, so here's the ICs. Nadine Betz, Dale Potter, Jacob Faulkner, Zoe Boise. Her whole family did a big load of ice cream. Tammy Sanford, Matt and David Taylor and his family enjoyed this ice cream celebration. And honestly, theirs was the most beautifully displayed ice cream. He did it 3 times. It was so good. Ili also did ice cream.
Yep.
Awesome.
Now, the interesting thing is that we had not had ice cream in our house this whole Corona time until we were getting ready for the party. And since that time, I celebrated before the day. I celebrated on the day yesterday.
And we just finished it up. We
finished it. So
good thing.
Definitely more than 140 calories.
We're not buying another one because the ice cream, Dan and ice cream go together like best friends forever.
It's in my DNA.
So welcome in, everybody. As we said, this is a series that we're starting on unique relationships, and a little later we're going to ask you where you want to go with this. But today is all about adulthood still with parents.
And it's interesting, this morning when we had our webinar, we had people from the Philippines and Malaysia who talked more about how it's absolutely normal for an adult to live with their parents until they get married, where we had other people in the West who said, really, by the time you're 19 years old, you need to be out. And then we had people going, well, it's a little embarrassing, but I'm still with my parents, which is told we're not looking at what is right or what is wrong here. I don't think that's even a question. But within that adult living with their adult parents, there's often a little bit of conflict. At least there is a unique relationship that we find not many people are talking about. So today in Duzie Live, we're talking about that exact thing. Being an adult, still living with your parents.
So we have a number of polls that we want to invite you into. And this is the sound when it's going to happen. And this isn't actually a poll, but we'd love for you to put in the chat. If your culture is one that when somebody is beyond 18 or 19 years old, the expected culture of your area is to stay in the home.
Or maybe even easier, in your culture, what age is it when normally people are leaving the home? And if it's when they're married, then just put married. So take a moment and put what age
do adults leave the parents and go on independent on their own. And while we're thinking about that, Kitty reminded me, and this morning we were talking about it, when we first moved into Poland in Kraków back in 1988, when we were living there, it was behind the Iron Curtain. It was still communist at that time. And it was so normal for 2, 3, sometimes even 4 generations to all live together in the home in a very small space. And I loved that bit of the culture, of the Polish culture. We just came from going around Latin America on the Logos Hope. And in Latin America, it's also very much a part of the culture to stay multiple generations in the home for a lot of years. Even when the children begin to have children, they're still in the home. And the culture is very much that.
I remember years ago, I think it was 1989, we were in Romania during the revolution, and we stayed with this family, and they basically had 2 rooms in the house. They had a kitchen that also had a toilet in it, and they also had a bedroom. And so mom and dad and their daughter and her husband and their child and us on a couch, we all slept there. And that was a very normal thing in that culture. So I love culture in this whole conversation.
And this morning in our Duzie Live, we had people represented from Malaysia and the Philippines, and they spoke very vocally about they come from a very communal society as well, where they're living.
That's what I talked about already.
Yeah.
So let's
look
look
at
at
that.
When are people leaving normally?
Okay, so let's see. We've got Jacob,
California. 19.
Joshua Potter, welcome in.
18
to 19. Evelyn in Texas.
1822.
Matthew Taylor, UK.
Probably 19.
Paulo Santos.
This is Portugal, around married or in the 30s.
Roseanne from Netherlands.
1822.
Kitty from Poland.
19, but not up to 25.
Depending on if you move out for university. Nadine, 18 to 25, Germany.
Great. Isn't this great?
Roseanne, she just Googled it, so she didn't know for her country, Netherlands.
To 24?
Yeah. Tammy's coming in from Guinea, West Africa, and she says girls get married about 13 to 15 years old. Mm-hmm. Normally, the girl goes and live with the husband's family until the husband builds her a hut for her and her children. The man gets his own hut because he often has more than one wife. There's culture for you right there.
In Israel, the Israel culture in the Bible days was that the wedding would be arranged, but the wedding wouldn't happen until the son came back to his parents' house and built a room onto the parents' house. And then she would come and live there. So all these different cultures.
So Dale says up in Michigan, generally once college or schooling training is done and once they can become established, usually it's a financial issue. Many of the people this morning who are coming in from the Philippines and from Malaysia were talking about the finances, even the UK. Finances are such that it's hard to go out and live independently.
Yeah. But you take statistics like New York City, New Jersey, places like that, the age range is up into the 30s easily because people just can't afford to live
out on their own.
We're in a rural area, the time they leave is much less. So all these different factors, it's not about being right or wrong, but it's how do we live within that situation?
Yeah, and I think this speaks to what we're talking about here. Independence versus interdependence. So are we able to live on our own for whatever reason, choice or non-choice, versus interdependence? And this is what we're talking about with adulthood, living still with our parents. And we really want to address this. So we invite you at any time and at every time you think of it, in the chat, just write your thoughts, your questions, your comments, your emotional outbursts. And then from time to time, we'll just hop into the chat and we'll grab some nuggets and discuss and process those together.
So we're going to invite Nadine in a few minutes. But before that, we're going to watch a video. And this video actually is talking about the brain and some of the things that take place in the brain through adolescence. And we're not just talking about the teenage years. Today, there's something called post-adolescence that really reaches up into 28, even 30 years old. And there's a phenomenon that takes place in the brain that causes us to not be as close with the parents because of pruning and things like that. We're going to watch this video and then we're going to have Nadine come on and ask her some questions.
Right. And this video, as Dan just said, is about adolescence, but we feel it's so appropriate to our topic today. So here's a bit of scientific background.
The adolescent period is absolutely amazing. People often give it a negative approach, saying, oh, it's a time where adolescents are going to lose their mind, or they're just immature, or raging hormones drive them crazy. These are all not only wrong, but they're myths that mislead us and actually disempower us. Whether we're adults or adolescents, they actually give us the wrong message and they make it so there's nothing we can do. So what is actually the truth? The truth is that instead of raging hormones, what's happening is we have remodeling in the brain. In ways we never could have predicted, we now understand two big things are happening in the brain. Things you as an adult can support adolescents in developing well, and if you're an adolescent, you actually can use this to help your brain grow in an optimal way. What are those two things? The brain is pruning itself. So imagine that in childhood, you're growing like a tree and establishing all these branches and all these leaves are growing. In the brain, that means connections among the basic cell, the neuron, called synapses, are being established, and you're soaking in the knowledge of the world, and that's beautiful. The tree is just growing, growing, growing. But then what happens, that surprised everyone, is the brain begins to prune itself. You start carving away some of those leaves, some of the smaller branches, even some of the larger branches. And the reason for the pruning is to specialize the brain. While the child is developing in ways that are really generalized, learning everything they can about everything they can, an adolescent is going to begin to find their passion, to actually find things they like, things they really love doing, and to drive their development in that way. So pruning is actually a use it or lose it principle underneath it. That if you don't use something, you're going to lose it. So if you like sports or like dancing or like music, do those things so you continue to establish those circuits. The second thing that happens in the remodeling adolescent brain is myelin formation. Myelin is a healthy sheath that allows connected neurons to communicate with each other in a much more effective way. How? It's 100 times faster, the signal that's sent down a neuron to communicate with another neuron, 100 times faster, and after it fires off, it's 30 times shorter the resting period that happens. 30 times 100 is 3,000. So when you've put down myelin, you've made your neurons communicate 3,000 times more effectively. That's a great thing. Now, the great thing too is that you as an adolescent can actually use the focus of your attention to be aware of your emotions, aware of other people, to be engaging in activities, to be doing things with your thoughts that actually reinforce the parts of your brain you want to hold on to. So the good news about the remodeling story is that a field called neuroplasticity, how the brain responds to experience, shows us that what you do with your mind can change the activity and therefore the structure of your brain. So if you then come up with the statement that the ultimate goal of brain remodeling is to make an integrated brain, to differentiate areas, that's the pruning, and myelinate them, that's the linkage. When you increase differentiation and linkage, you make the brain more integrated. And an integrated brain is the pathway toward well-being. And you can do mind-sight exercises. These are exercises that increase insight, empathy, and integration. And if you do them as an adolescent, and you can also do them as an adult, you'll actually increase the integration of your brain as your brain is growing, not just during adolescence, but throughout the lifespan. And what's the outcome of integration? When integration is made visible, it's kindness and compassion. And so what we see through adolescent development is that our relationships become built on connections that are deep and filled with honoring each other's vulnerability, that's kindness, and supporting connections that are compassionate, filled with a sense of caring about other people and wanting to help them. This is the kind of world we can build as we move through life and support each other in our development.
Oh, that's good. I love that because I am a visual person, and for me to see that, I love the connections. I love the going from pruning to the link that's needed. But in the process of moving into adulthood, the young adult's brain is changing, and the parent's brain is not. And sometimes
that's the real issue.
Causes the why are you always like this, or why aren't you like you used to be? It's because the brain is shifting, and if it's worked right, it'll move into that kindness, compassion. That's where we want it to move to for sure.
Nadine, yay, you're with us. That's awesome.
Hello.
So, Nadine, welcome in. It's great to see you. And Nadine is our poster child today for adulthood still with their parents.
Let's take a quick poll first, shall we?
Yeah, well, you're right here, Nadine. We're going to get to know you. Just stay right there.
Yeah, I'm going to.
Those of you who are here in the chat, we want to just take a quick poll with you. Are you still living with your parents right now? And your answers could be, yes, I am now living with my parents. No, but I was. Not now, but I will be. Or no, I'm not living with my parents.
If your answer is I'm not sure, you should look around the house, really.
All right. So, the poll is changing. Right
now,
we didn't do the poll sound.
Oh.
We're taking a poll. All
right
right.
Now, 75% is saying, yes, I am living with my parents. Now 72%. 16% is no. My mother earlier commented that she left when she was 17, but after she got married, she moved back for a while, it looked like. I'm not sure.
So this is the combination of many. We'll leave that up. We're at 66% yes, and 26 no, and 6% not now, but I will be. So somebody's on their way to living with their parents as well. Wow, very interesting.
And it's a day that we live where people are moving and they leave for a while, they come back, they can't just immediately get their own place. or move in with friends, and there is a lot of removing with parents.
And Corona definitely has really brought this dynamic.
All right, let's
as well.
end this poll.
Thank you so much for voting.
So most people here today are still living with their parents.
So Nadine, it's so good to have you.
Yeah, it's amazing to be
Nadine,
here.
just give us a little bit of your backstory. How did you grow up? You were with your parents, you went somewhere, you're back. Tell us about those dynamics of you so far.
Yes, I'd love to. So hello to everyone. It's good to see you in the chat or hear from you there. So yeah, as Susie said, I'm Nadine. I'm originally from Germany, but I grew up with my parents as missionaries in Micronesia. So there I lived till I was 9 years old, moving back and forth to Germany sometimes. But then since I was 9, I lived at one place for 12 years, and that was in Germany in a little village. Then I went to the ship Lagershov, oh yes, and there I stayed for 2 years. And then I came back just last October, and since then I was, I would say my home base was here. Where my parents lived, though they moved while I was on the ship, so it's a total new place, or it was a total new place when I came back. And yeah, since then I'm here.
So thank you, Nadine, for that. And you have multiple dynamics going on, being with your parents, going away, then having your whole worldview horizons expanded. You grew, you developed, just like that video we just saw, prune, and you were specializing and becoming more beautiful. I'm completely biased, and I'm sticking with it.
And she's a third culture kid, which also leads to where do I belong? Where do I live? So it's not just parents or not, it's country, it's all those things.
And I can appreciate that while you were on the ship, your parents in ministry moved to a new location. And then you came home, but you're not home.
Yeah.
But you're making it your home. So tell us about some of the dynamics of independence versus interdependence, maybe boundaries, expectations, being a child with maturity, communication. What's your story currently with your parents living at home?
Yeah, it's still a super exciting story. I think every week can be different because, as you said, like there's so much happening in this space, and it's a whole new world you're coming into. And I mean, the ship was a total different world. You know, the focus was ministry all the time, and so many young people and such a big community. And from there, coming to a place where I'm the only child at home suddenly again, and being with my parents was very interesting. And since then, it's really been a very interesting story that God has been writing and that I've been experiencing, because there were times where I just looked through my journal today again where I was like, wow, God, like there was an endless list of things that I just didn't understand. I just came home and I was like, okay, I remember I lived with you for so long, but I just don't understand why you guys are acting that way, why you make a big deal out of nothing, you know, and so many questions I had towards my parents. And I was just like, wow, where should I start? And I'm grateful that since then, you know, things developed. We went through some rough days and also some good new moments where we could share life anew together. So yeah, there has been a lot of different seasons in that going on.
We've been talking about emotions the last few weeks here on Duzie Live. What would you say are 2 or 3 of your current emotions when you think about being an adult living at home with your parents?
Yeah. So currently in this moment or in this season that I'm in now, I think one is, I don't know if you can call it an emotion, but I'll just do it, is this fight for your freedom. And yet there is also a sense of gratitude, because now I've been with my parents since the Corona time, which is in Germany end of March, so quite a long time. And I just really asked God to help me to see the positive side of it, and he actually helped me too. So I think there's a sense of gratitude, and yet many times there's just this sense of being annoyed, because sometimes you're just like, why is it still so hard? You know, like even though you can see the positive things, it's still sometimes so hard.
Yeah. And thank you, Nadine, for saying that. The fight for freedom gratitude and annoyed. And we can all understand that because we've been at varying stages of that.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking even last week about transition, when you have two conflicting emotions that are happening at the same time, you're in transition. Would you categorize yourself as still in a transition state?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes.
All right. And I think that having gratitude and being annoyed are coming all at the same time, or different moments of your interaction with your parents.
Yeah.
I think another thing that is very you that I really appreciate about you is that you always love to communicate from the heart. How is that dynamic with you and your parents?
Yeah, it's a very interesting one, and I think we learned quite about that, because coming back from the ship, I just popped into the new for me, but for them it was the normal already for them. So I was like, whoa, this is also new. And they just kept on going. And yes, they took time, to care for me, but they had their life going on. And I was like, oh, there's so many questions I have, and I just need a space where I can cry and be. And yes, my parents were there for me, but yet it was this, I feel like they don't get it. Like, it's really deep, and I need to hear from them as well, what's going on in their heart. But for them, it was just normal life, and I think there were still stuff going on, and they also shared, but I couldn't see it as that in that moment, because for me, it was such a huge change and so many deep emotions going on that I was like, okay, I feel like we're not on the same page right now.
Yeah. Can you identify what is it that's making you not be on the same page?
I think one thing was for me, that it was their normal life that I suddenly stepped into. And for them, for sure, it was a change, suddenly having their daughter back. But for me, it was just everything changed around me. And I think that made it hard for me, to feel like there's so much I have to learn. I don't even know where the glasses are to put, where they put the glasses in my kitchen. And I remember one day I was just like crying in the kitchen because I was like, there's nothing I know here. And for them, they were like, okay, what are we going to do with her? And I think that made it hard sometimes. But it was just, this different stages of life.
Yes.
And yet also different worldviews, because I came from the ship, with very different worldviews, yes, but also, very straight, and this is what we go for, and very passionate. And, they were more, soft and caring and still straight in what they think. But, I think I was very hard sometimes and even judgmental towards them, which I had to learn to even, take a step back and ask them to explain their perspective to me, and not just be like, well, this is my worldview, and you better get that one as well, otherwise it will not work, because that's not the right thing to do. But in that moment, you just feel like, oh, I don't know how to really connect to their world.
Yeah, I think that's a huge concept, communication, and asking them the questions to help clarify what are you thinking here, and what am I thinking? What are some aspects of that communication that have been helpful for you that actually work, and maybe one or two that didn't work?
Yeah. So I think it's very simple things that I had to learn again to, for example, not ask my dad, when he's in a super stressful moment. Though maybe in my mind it just popped up and I was like, oh wow, Dad, this is something I really want to share. And he was like, whoa, I just need to go to my next appointment or something. And just realize, people are in their spaces and I'm in my space, but to somehow take steps towards each other, and as well to set time apart and really ask them as well to be open. And I'm very grateful that they actually were, like open to share as well and learn how I communicate. And, that I think for me, it's very important, as I said before, that I get to the heart issues, or, what their values are. And, they're way older than I am, obviously, but for me, they're kind of old people, and they've established
that your parents were older than you. That really works out well.
Would be good, right? Yeah, so they have their values and their way of life pretty established, I would say. And for me, I'm figuring it all out. So having them come a step towards me in that, actually allowing them to ask. You understand what I mean? So they would actually open up about things, that are kind of normal for them, but are important to me. So that has been really cool. But for me as well, to be interested in what is going on in their life, though I don't find it the most interesting. I wouldn't choose that for me. But I know it's where we're there right now, and it's important to show genuine interest in each other.
Got a few comments coming in, Suze. Why don't we take those for a moment and then we can.
Yeah, Nadine, thank you so much for sharing what's working and what isn't, especially in communication. And Elaine says, really appreciate the point about the communication and the worldview differences, that as we become our adults, our value systems might adjust or be different than others. And I think that speaks to the brain video that we were just watching about pruning. You have specialized in a few areas. For example, on the ship, worship is one of the things that's so near and dear to your heart. And that puts you in a space. And so you might not have brain space for other things. The way you described it so beautifully was like, doesn't really interest me. The things that are important to them. And Jess says, yep, welcome in, by the way, Jess. Yep, doing the dishes used to be such a struggle. Can you imagine doing the dishes and putting them away leaves you in a pile on the floor? I can now. You're not alone, Nadine.
Thank you so much, Jess. Thank you.
Matt says, haha, having younger parents could be problematic.
Yeah, would be kind of weird, right?
Yeah. And Michelle, thank you for jumping in as well. She says, that's deep. Yeah, thank you for sharing the real issues that's going on. Can you also speak, Nadine, about you becoming mature versus being the child that left the home, and you went away and you have matured and specialized and have new values and worldviews in so many ways, versus being the child that you left with? How has that worked out for you with your parents?
Yeah, sometimes better, sometimes not that well. It's very interesting, actually, because I talked to a friend of mine, and she also shared that sometimes we, when something triggers a special emotion, or you're just like suddenly getting annoyed, you react like a child again. And you're like, why are you suddenly so frustrated about things, or so easily annoyed? And like, you're even surprised about yourself afterwards. In the moment, you're just like, oh my word, I have to get this out. So there were some moments where I really felt like I was again this child and this teenager, and I was like, man, God, I feel like I'm taking so many steps back because I just don't remember how to be my new self in the new environment. And that was really hard. And I think it brought me back to this, okay, sometimes you just have to relearn things in a new situation or in a new environment, and that's okay. And then other moments were really cool, where I could see that I could not just meet my parents, on this child level, but also on this, we can talk as adults about things. And that was really, really cool, because I could see how they value my opinion in a different way, and I could value theirs in a different way. I didn't just think, oh, these are my parents trying to tell me what to do, but I could more see, wow, this is advice from people that have lived life, and more like with you guys, like a mentoring, where it was like, wow, this is actually something I can maybe take into consideration, or I can also view like that, or just on a more normal basis.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. That's so good. I watched a TED Talk yesterday, and it was really focusing on empathy. And one of the takeaways for me is that we become more empathetic when we can hear the backstories of people. So when we hear the stories, and maybe because our parents are our parents, we've heard many of their stories before, but when we can take time to ask them questions to help them unpack why they have their worldviews, or why they have their perspectives or values, like what instilled that into them. And you've gone away, you've developed and changed, and you have a story that allows you to change. And one of the things we talked about this morning, we called it micro. I'm trying to remember what it was. Micro snaps or something like that.
Micro transitions?
Yeah, micro transitions happened in your life in the past 2+ years without your parents. And so taking opportunities, for example, to have conversations. This morning, we also talked about having side-by-side conversations, and not necessarily so intense face-to-face, eye-to-eye, but while you're walking, or while you're doing dishes or cooking, or you're doing some kind of an experience together where it's not like focused on I'm downloading to you, you're downloading to me. You get back stories. And for example, you can tell your story of when we were in Chile and that happened, and here was my experience, and this is what transformed me, and this is how I'm thinking now, and that gave me this value.
We got a few questions coming in there as well.
And while I'm looking at the questions quick, how does that land with you, Nadine, about like stories and micro snapshots of your world?
Yeah, it's so cool that you said that, because it's so true. Like sometimes you just see so much more of the person, and you can value the person so much more when you hear their story. And my dad, you know, he's among 3 girls in his family, so he doesn't talk that much because we talk too much all the time. But sometimes there were just moments, and I remember this one specific one where mom went to the phone because someone called, and dad and I were just sitting there, and I was like, oh, no, we have to call mom again. But then I was like, okay, why not use this time and actually ask dad? And then I don't know how we got to the topic, but I just asked him on how it was for him when he actually wanted to become pilot. And then he talked like for 50 minutes, and there was such a joy and such an excitement. And I was like, wow, that's a total new side of you. Like, that's so cool. And, you know, I think he also valued it so much that someone would actually be interested in something so long ago or something like that. So it was such a special moment. And we also sometimes go for walks because my dad has an office job or is a lot in the office. So sometimes he just wants to go out. And I think it's, again, this, you know, taking step towards each other, even in the conversations, but also in setting the time apart to get to know each other again. Because I truly believe that if God placed us together, even in this Corona time for such a long season, there's something, you know, behind it, and a blessing as well. So yeah, it's cool to discover, but also sometimes hard. So it's both.
Yeah, I think that's a very valuable statement, taking the time for conversations and also for activities like walking. Let's see, Matt's asking, thanks, Nadine. You said you set aside time for communication with your parents. Was that a one-time conversation, or has it been multiple conversations to get you where you're at?
Multiple conversations, many. When I remember like our first months, you know, we had conversations, but they didn't always end well. So yeah, we had to have many conversations. And sometimes, you know, you really went deep then, and then you felt like, okay, we're moving forward. And sometimes it was just like, okay, we got to still work on that.
Yeah. So you also talked about timing. This morning, some of the responses in the chat space was, what is a good setup for you to have good connections with your parents? You mentioned it's not good when your dad's on his way to an appointment, but it is good if you go on a walk with him. This morning, Megan was talking about how she has specific coffee moments with her mom, and she found that late at night when things were a little bit more relaxed, that was a good time. What about you, Nadine? And while you're answering it, I wonder about anybody in the chat. What do you find is a good setup for you and your parents to have those important, maybe even just casual conversations? What does that look like?
Yeah, so one thing we did, or at the beginning at least of this quarantine time, was to have 1 hour each evening to read scriptures together. Because for me personally, it was also important to not just be family together, but because it was the only Christians I could have around, to also be a spiritual family. Because I feel like as Christians, you or even if you have a Christian family, you don't always have the focus on that. But I had it on my heart, and that was really cool to have this time set apart. And it didn't always work. Our family is sometimes chaotic, but it's okay, because every time it did work, there was something valuable in it. And yeah, because I came to a total new place, I think there weren't so many other people I could talk to, you know, one like in real life on the phone, yes, but not in real life. So a lot of talks happened as well, just in the car or when we were in the garden doing some stuff. So in random moments. So I remember this one time now with the Bible study where we set apart time, but normally it just happens sometimes. So it depends. Yeah.
So planned and unplanned. Evelyn wants to know, do you ever find it annoys you when your parents try too hard to understand how you're feeling, but they don't actually relate to it, so it feels fake?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I'm like, Mom, I think you're not going to get it. And then she's like, no, but I want to understand. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I try to somehow, take steps towards her again and, explain a little bit, but not expect her to understand all of it, because I'll have like friends that I can share that with because they're in the same situation as I am. But I think they really, really want to understand. So I also want to not totally push them away, because I did that and it hurt her a lot. So I was like, okay, maybe I can share, a bit that will just make her feel that I don't want to exclude her of everything, but won't put pressure on her to understand it totally, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you for sharing so deeply. We hear you, Nadine. Neil says, my
Thanks for hearing.
Ship transition back home was a disaster. So I left home and left the country. Never want to live back home. That was over 30 years ago. Yeah. And Neil just continues on and says, I've coached and mentored many on re-entry after that. I think that's such value from these really difficult situations. We don't want anybody else to go through that. Like sounds like is happening with you, Neil. And Matt says, I like that side-by-side conversations idea. Those conversations are really valuable.
Matt, some of the best conversations you and I had on the ship were those side-by-side walks for hours. Those are the best, because it's just focusing forward. That's a good comment, Matt.
And Matt says about cooking, sometimes cooking is a good time to chat, and sometimes it's not at all a good time. Sounds like those are like screaming at us.
Very true.
And Rachel says, and quarantine is helping me talk more to my parents for obvious reasons. Yeah. And Evelyn says, the most natural times for me are reconnecting with my parents, or in the kitchen with my mom, or doing a project together with my dad. Interesting. Kitchen with mom and project with dad. Elaine says, for my mom, it's been able to happen when we're driving together, but specifically during our wine tasting nights together, since we haven't had much chance to drive together with work business. Drive time for me and my dad as well, because there's not as much happening to bring distraction. Being stuck together in a good way. Yeah. And Evelyn says, thanks, Nadine. Glad to know I'm not the only one.
No, you're not.
We actually have a tool that Susie and I were looking at that helps us ask the questions when we're in those conflict places, where we're going. If we're rising above the conflict, or are we getting stuck in it? And maybe in a few minutes we can show that conflict question tool.
Just as we wind down, Nadine, first of all, it's been so amazing for you to be vulnerable with us and share stories and experiences and emotions. And I love that you're so vulnerable like that. But if you would have just a little cap, you'd like to, speak to the 75% of us, even here on Duzie Live today, that are in your similar situation. What's coming from your heart to us?
Yes. So I think from a lot of what I shared, maybe people could hear that I think personally that there's a reason that God put us in each of the seasons that we're in. And for me, honestly, the 3 first months back at home, I couldn't see that at all. And I think being honest with God, with yourself, and with the people around you about that is super important, because otherwise you will not get through it in a healthy way, I think. And it will just make you feel like you have to somehow fix it or just solve the problem when you just don't know how. And then I think taking step by step, just time for me, it was prayer, to just pray over things that really disturbed me, and as well to pray for the perspective of God on the situation, because I think when you come with so many emotions and in such a huge transition, you can often just, or for me personally, it's like I put the problems that I have on other people, or, make them part of the problem, though they're not really. And yeah, so I think prayer was an important one for me. And yet, yeah, I think we can just long for understanding on our side, but as well on the other side. And then it can really be a valuable connection again to be back at home through the ups and through the downs.
That's good.
Oh, Nadine, I heard you say honest with yourself and others and God, just a reach out here. You don't have to get everything from your parents. Sometimes for whatever reason, that connection cannot be as close as maybe you'd even desire. So it's okay to reach out to God and others as well. And I think you stated that very beautifully. And your step-by-step self-connection with yourself and with God has made such a difference to understand what's going on in you and the drive for understanding. And obviously we hear the love that you have for your parents and appreciation for them and the current struggle just to find the right dynamics in this season for you. Thank you so much, Nadine.
Oh, thank you, guys.
When you go back into the chat world, if you're willing to put your email or something there that people can contact you if they want to talk more, I think that would be a really great thing.
Yeah, let us know how we can chat with you. We do love and appreciate you, Nadine. Thanks for just being our poster child of the adult living with your parents. That was awesome to hear your heart.
Talk to you later.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. So now we're going to just take a quick little, do the poll first.
So let's do a poll.
Let's do the second poll. Give everybody a little breather here.
So here's the poll right here. Where do you most often find your conflict leads you? This talking with mainly about your parents right here. Where most often do you find your conflict leads you? Does it lead you to fear? And we've spent a number of weeks talking about fear and that emotion. Does it lead you to misunderstanding in the conflict? Or does it lead you to miscommunication? Right now,
it's 100% miscommunication.
It's like, whoa, 100.
Where does conflict lead you? Oh, it just changed. 66% miscommunication.
Some of them need moments
33% misunderstanding. Oh, and now we got some fear coming in. We got 25% fear, 25% misunderstanding.
Oh,
and now
it's up to
60% miscommunication. 14% fear.
57 miscommunication. Misunderstanding has taken over with 58%.
If you bet it on misunderstanding, it's just taking the lead by a leap and a bound.
Wow, it's changing. Let's leave it another second or so. Here's our current dynamics. We've got misunderstanding. It just changed to 60% just now. Miscommunication 33% and fear at 6%.
I think the race is going to be won by misunderstanding.
Yeah, it sure looks like that. I'm going to take a new snap just for myself.
Okay.
Wow. Okay, misunderstanding, miscommunication.
Fear is in the rear with only
5%. So misunderstanding is taking the lead. This morning, miscommunication took the lead by about 75%.
Well, miscommunication had a good head start this afternoon, but
that's right.
Maybe it was exhausted because it ran so hard this morning. Well, let's end that.
Is this like a horse?
It could be like a horse race.
Misunderstanding is currently at 61%, miscommunication 33%, and fear at 5%.
Thank you for taking the poll.
Yeah, we appreciate that so much. Wow. And some of you, as in all of our polls, maybe it didn't hit exactly what you want. So if you want to expound on any of your thoughts or answer, the chat is the space for it. And meanwhile, Nadine's put her email there for you to connect with her.
So let's look at a few slides as we try to put all this into some kind of a tool. This is Living with Conflict, looking specifically at the conflict question tool. And if you see, I just drew a little picture there on the side of it. There is this, at the very base, there is this root system. It's like an onion. It's there. It's all wrapped up inside of each other. But then it grows in different ways. And you see, conflict doesn't happen on your own. There has to be two or more. But it grows into some beautiful hearts. There's some outside influence. There's some dynamic there. But you see that the goal where it's going is into that heart. And hopefully we will have conflict, but hopefully we'll keep moving into that love zone.
So conflict is basically to come into collision or disagreement. Like Dan said, it takes at least two people to have a conflict and some kind of a collision or disagreement on any level about any subject.
I love the donkey conflict. Those of you who've ever sat down with me with a conflict, you probably have seen this before. But these are A, B, C, D, E, and F levels. Oftentimes, I use it when someone talks of a conflict. Where do you see that conflict? You see in A, everything's going all right. This one's viewing that hay, this one's viewing that hay. But then something happens and there's a bit of a tug of war. There's tension and there's a leaning away from each other. That happens in conflict. But then in C, you see there begins to be some kicking, some my way or no way, which always leads to D, which is sitting. No one's eating hay. No one's talking. Lots of question marks. Yeah. Heads are down. Depression. That's oftentimes where conflict leads us. But I love E and F because something happened between D and E that caused the donkeys to say, all right, let's go eat on your pile first. And then let's go eat on my pile. There is this mutual moving together that I would say in the drawing meets us at that place of love and acceptance. It's not my way, but what is the we way together?
And I love that E and F, the tails are happily wagging.
Happy.
They're having a good time. So about the poll.
There's another one you can find online. We're in D. You have the one donkey shooting the other donkey and then dragging it back and forth to both piles. That's not the tool that we want to see.
You might want to take a screenshot of that particular tool if that hits you. Matt says, it's really interesting poll. I usually think of conflict coming out of fear, misunderstanding, and or miscommunication, but hadn't thought before about the conflict leading to them. And Elaine says, I think sometimes the fear is often the cause of the conflict. Fear to be misunderstood, fear that we aren't connecting, fear that we can't connect, and it builds up into the conflict. Well stated, Elaine. I think you should write a poem about that. I can't wait for it. And Elaine says, well put, Elaine. I can relate, and Zoe can relate with that too. Thank you for putting that there. And thanks again for your comments there.
So sometimes as followers of Jesus, we almost feel guilty that we're in conflict. Well, read the Bible. The Bible is full of conflicts. We've just written a lot down there. There are conflicts all the way through the Bible. Do you know why? Because it's a great story. You don't have a great story without conflict. It doesn't exist. When you're writing a story, you have to have conflict.
Internal and external.
So conflict is absolutely important. We can't avoid it, but we have to move through it.
And you notice that Jesus is in the list of being in the midst of conflict. Life is a story about conflicts, but life is also a story about resolved conflicts. And that speaks to the heart part of the design that Dan was telling us about earlier. So it's not if you're living with conflict, but when you're living with conflict. Don't forget the passage from Romans 5:3-4 that says, not only so, but we also rejoice in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. And verse 5 talks about, and hope does not disappoint us.
And those of you who've lived around the world, you know those people who went through so much bad stuff. They're living in poverty. They have almost nothing. Yet many times they're the most hopeful people. Where I know of people who never allowed them to go through. They never allowed themselves to experience the conflict. They just avoided the conflict. And they live a hopeless life. And so it's very important for us to walk through these steps.
And I can really appreciate the way Nadine told us her story, how she's really annoyed with the situation with her parents, but she also has such gratitude. And so in the situation of suffering, her perspective of gratitude and her fight for freedom is making a difference in this conflict.
So let's look at conflict first. What you can maybe put one in your mind there of a conflict you're going through. Just that is like the base level. And the question we're asking ourselves here is, am I in conflict?
Or when? Because that's like a normal. And Proverbs 15:18 says, a hot-tempered person stirs up conflict, but the one who is patient calms a quarrel.
So we're going to look at stair steps. First of all, we're going to go down. We're going to see where conflict takes us. Conflict also always, really, well, not always, but most of the time brings us to a place of fear. And we have to acknowledge in the conflict, what am I afraid of?
Yeah.
What in if we can answer that, you can very quickly move through it. If you don't acknowledge your fear, oftentimes you get stuck.
2 Corinthians 7:5 says, "For when I came into Macedonia, we had no rest, but we were harassed on every turn, conflicts on the outside, fears on the inside." And I love the concept that this paints for us, that there are conflicts that happen on the outside, but we all have a response. And many times our fears come from the inside. For me, for example, even just recently this weekend, I came up against, I've been struggling with, am I enough in this season of life? And I know, and yet my fears came up even this weekend. Dan is so strategic, so future oriented, so organized in his mind that he can move very fast. And if we're not communicating and understanding one another well, my fear has been, Dan's going to leave me behind. I'm afraid that I'm not going to be able to be in this journey together. The reality is, the truth is, I am. And we had that talk. And the conflict for me was, Dan's moving so fast and I'm moving so slow. What's my part? What's his part? And we talked about our fears. We communicated about these fears. Dan spoke the truth to me. And this made such a difference in my internal response.
Because if I get to tomorrow without her, I won't know where I'm at. So but anyway,
need each other.
If we don't deal with the fear, then it goes into the next step down, which is misunderstanding. We have to ask our question, what are you saying? We need to speak into that. And what is the story I'm telling myself? We need to understand what they're saying, because we can't read their mind. Even if we've lived with them all of our life, we don't know what they're thinking until we ask. And we also have to reveal, what's the story I'm telling myself?
Yeah, Proverbs 3:21 says, "My son, do not let wisdom and understanding out of your sight. Preserve sound judgment and discretion." Proverbs talks a lot about understanding, and go sell all that to get understanding and wisdom, and don't just be stuck in the fear, but the misunderstanding can cause such trauma.
And Dale asked about the tension, the energy that runs between them. There is.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not necessarily bad energy. It's like the guitar that you tighten that string
the right
just
tension.
Right, so you have that tension, and it creates something. And I think that's important in this process.
Yeah, so let's take it down lower.
Go to the basement here. So if you're not dealing with the fear, there's misunderstanding. That leaves us into miscommunication, which is actually you stop trusting. The miscommunication is, I don't get it. There's a loss of trust, and you need to ask, how can we clarify this? How can you clarify? You need to get back on the page together.
Right. Matthew 12:37 says, "For by your words you will be acquitted, and by your words you will be condemned." Words are so important in this process of fear, misunderstanding, miscommunication. The words that go out or don't go out can cause a lot of conflict. And as Dan already alluded to, probably even deeper is mistrust. And that's devastating.
A little secret that Susie and I use a lot is we take a spoon. We call them a spoon conversation, because oftentimes in the miscommunication, you don't have enough time to totally express yourself before the other one starts talking. Then you talk, and you never get to the end. So
I talk the most.
Yes. And so I get the spoon for a little bit. When I have the spoon, I can talk as long as I need to if I have the spoon, and she will remain silent, because sometimes I have to take a few pauses to come up with what I'm really thinking. When there's just noise filling the room, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So as long as I have the spoon, I can communicate. And then I hand the spoon to her, and I go quiet.
And I get to talk. Whoa!
But when you give the gift of letting someone finish their sentences, finish their thoughts, even stop to think of what they're saying, then oftentimes you can climb back up.
Yeah, and Dale says, misunderstanding often comes through listening without the need to build a response. And I would add to that empathy. Dan just described empathy. This weekend, I did a good thing. It doesn't always happen like this. In fact, most often I am talk, and Dan says, I don't get a word in and he doesn't get to do it. Well, we were sharing what we had been learning. We were dividing and conquering and coming back, and Dan told me what he was learning, but I'm sure it was the Holy Spirit just impressing on me, give Dan more time, ask the what else question. He told me the what and the how, but he probably had more how it related to him. And I asked him, and what else? How does that impact you? And he had a good long chunk of way more to communicate to me. And if I wouldn't have taken that moment with empathy,
she wouldn't have got it.
I wouldn't have got it. And oftentimes I do miss all those nuggets because I'm talking too much. So the miscommunication or lack of communication can cause a lot of things.
Let's move back up the ladder here. So let's say we've chosen at conflict to discuss our fear. We take that step up. It's actually harder to go up than to go down. But we ask, what are we afraid of?
2 Timothy 1:7 says, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. And I think the importance when we have conflict, instead of going down or the downward spiral or down these steps, is to go up. And it's very important that we're in what I love how Brene Brown calls it, or not Brene Brown, Dr. Caroline Leaf calls it the love zone. So you're in a place that's safe, that's honoring, that's empathetic, and we're actually in a place to discuss our fears. And Matt says, can we have that spoon on the internet too? That would help a lot of conversations. So love that thought, Matt. And Dale says, a broken trust is the bruise that often will not heal. Think of bruised fruit. Wow, that's powerful. Yeah, Nadine and Elaine are just really tracking with that one. It can also be like a skin or bone bruise. The bruise is visible and it creates deep sensitivity. It creates an awareness that necessitates a sense of carefulness, time, and healing in order to move forward.
Love that.
Yeah, and Jess says, I think it's easier to dispel conflict before it gets to fear once you have the trust in the relationship. Without it, it leads to fear and misunderstanding and, of course, miscommunication. The other day, I had to apologize to my mother for speaking and treating her like a peer rather than an authority figure. Had I not trusted she would understand, then she would have misunderstood me as rude and disrespectful.
Totally true.
But that was not my intention. Whoops, press send by accident. Yeah, just thank you for spelling that out there. Really important. Many of our cultures, we have the availability to speak like a peer to our parents. But many of our family situations and our parental dynamics are not that way at all. In Asia, they were saying this morning, they're not even allowed to speak up and ask questions. Mm-hmm. That communication is not even culturally allowed. So they have to find new ways besides even what we're talking about here.
And someone said something there about trust, and it's so important. And without trust, you simply cannot move forward. And so we need to make sure that in trust, we're moving in the right direction. Suze, what happened here?
I'm not quite sure what happened here.
Can everyone see us still? Something just went crazy here. Oh, there you go.
Okay, well, I just zoomed up our
All
screen.
I could see there for a few minutes was my left nostril.
And
so let's move up.
Dale says, relationship must be established before one can trust enough to reveal one's fears. True, very true.
So we move up from conflict to we discuss our fears. Mm-hmm. We talk about it in a very healthy way, giving full respect. But then we move to the place where we create understanding. And the question we're asking there is, what is unclear and what is true?
Yeah.
And I think that's the most important thing. I think it's okay to say, well, I thought you were saying all that's good. But oftentimes all we have is to come back and say, Susie, all that, yep, true, yep. But what is true? What do you know as a fact?
Very helpful for me. John 8:32 says, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And Nadine was talking about the fight for freedom, the freedom of knowing the truth and being set free.
Yeah. And then the final step where you move up into that is ask and listen. And I think so many of our conflicts would be resolved if we listened first.
Yes.
So the question here is what, how, and what else? And then listen.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, our need to be heard will be solved when we hear what they're saying.
Yep. James 1:8 says everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And Kim Kukuro has been talking to us about having big hearts with 2 ears. So we're listening more than we're trying to speak or discuss. And the combination of asking and listening so that we can understand. And I think if I would draw a circle around it, it would be enclosed in trust. You guys have been bringing this out, and I would put a circle of trust around these steps up and down as well.
Which moves us to the place that we need to ask for forgiveness. And that's what Justin says as well. Sometimes we say things, doesn't come off the way we want it, and we need to ask for forgiveness. Even before, well, I need their forgiveness, whatever, we need to be the one that asks for forgiveness.
Yeah, that's right. And Jess is saying the 2 coaching questions: what, how, and what else? Good. I'm glad you've got that. That is what we need to. And ask for forgiveness. Colossians 3:13 says, bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. Forgiveness does something most of all for us. We're the one that receives almost all of the benefits, because many times those people we're asking forgiveness for or needing to forgive, they have no clue that it's our issue. So when we forgive, we release them from having the power over our lives.
It's like carrying something that's too heavy for you, and then someone comes along and says, can I carry that for you? When we forgive, let God carry that.
Yeah, so we're just going to turn our video off here a second. If you need to snap that picture, that kind of gives all of the concepts there. And I'm going to begin to share, for those of you who are live with us right now, I'm going to share that whole PDF of what you just saw, Living with Conflict Tool by Duzie. So if you would like to have that, you can download that now. If you have a problem with being able to download, just send us an email, connect@duzie.com, or just respond to the link you got here to this Duzie Live, and we can send you that whole PDF document there as well. Yeah, so there is our Living with Conflict Tool presentation. So would love to know. I know that we're over our hour mark. We try to keep content there, but we are available to stay here and carry on with questions, comments, emotional outbursts.
Now, if you've been to any restaurants over the last 6 weeks, you know that you can't go sit down, but you can do takeaway. And we want to know, as a result of this hour, what are you taking away? What's one thing as a result of this time that you want to remember? Put that into your head, and if you would, put it into the chat to share with everyone. This is the one thing that I want to take away from this Duzie Live.
Thank you, Elaine, for jumping in. You got to get going. So what are your takeaways? For me, a takeaway that I heard from Nadine is what she was talking about, gratitude, and having that perspective of gratitude that would cover even these situations that are tough, that you're annoyed in the process of fighting for freedom.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are some of the things that hit you from Nadine's talk, maybe from the video, maybe from this conflict tool that we just went through, maybe something you thought of that you didn't even hear anybody say?
While you're writing that, we have one more poll, right?
Yeah, we sure do. And the poll is unique relationships. Which would you like to hear more about? We have a series going of unique relationships. These are the subjects that we're thinking of. We'd like to know which order you'd like to see them rolled out in. Would you like to hear more about adulthood, still living with parents? Would you like to hear about boy meets girl?
Or multi-generational relationships? How do the different generations relate to each other? Even those who are really close, like Generation Y and Z, maybe only a couple years apart, but difficult conflicts as well. Maybe that could be it.
Maybe some of you want to hear about friendships with non-believers.
Yeah,
many of you have friendships that, how do you just move in that space? So The race is on, and currently we have 50% saying boy meets girl, and just changed.
Friendship with non-believers is now at 50%.
Oh, it's changing again, so quickly.
40%. Wow, it's back and forth.
Oh,
I think some of you just wait until I say something, then you push the button.
I'm going to take a snap of it. Friendship with non-believers is at 45%. And then multi-generational friendships is coming in at 33%. And boy meets girl moved to 25%.
Oh, it just changed again.
Okay.
41, 20. Anyway.
It's close. It's really, really close. Wow, this morning, this morning it came out with the most for multi-generational relationships, and secondly, boy meets girl. Yep. And you guys in this group here, you have number one, friendship with non-believers.
Then so multi-generational, then boy meets girl.
So good. And thank you so much for taking this poll. That's awesome. So what questions, comments, emotional outbursts do you have?
Before you say that, one other thing I'd love to say is if you have to leave for next week, we're going to be putting out the advertisement. Please invite a handful of friends, people who have not experienced this before. Invite them in this conversation about unique relationships.
Yeah, and don't, Jess, you can't choose, just like our polls. Please feel free to put in the chat. If you'd like them all, you just put whichever ones
you like. People this morning actually put suggestions that weren't even in the poll.
Yeah, so we love that now or anytime as you're thinking about it, as we begin this series of unique relationships. Don't forget that your life is a remarkable story, an adventure that only you can create. May this chapter be a fully alive revolution as you love your life, your world, and your God.
This has been great, and we're going to go to backstage in a moment. But my name is Dan.
And my name is Susie, and together we're a Duzie. Live fully and love fully. So I think we turn around now, right?
We go backstage.
Backstage, and here we are again. We're in the backstage portion. For those who need to leave, again, thank you for those who have joined us live and those who are joining by replay.
In the backstage, we can just chat about any of these things, give more thoughts, and see where it goes.
Don't forget to write your takeaway before you leave, if you don't mind. And Evelyn says, my takeaway would be just trying to get a step closer to my parents, but not putting pressure on them to understand everything about me. We hear you, Evelyn, and that is such a good step closer. And Cheryl says, I think too often we use the words you always or you never. They cause a lot of conflict.
So true.
Yeah, when we just generalize and put it all out there. Matt says, haha, this is going to be boy meets unbelieving girl at this rate.
That's another one we could do.
That's so funny. I love the way your brain thinks, Matt. That's often. That's so good. Rian says, what's so refreshing between the two webinars is to see so many differences in questions, how we all live with our experiences with our families. I have shared this morning how my family communication is one-sided because of the respect and the hierarchy can lead to misunderstanding in my home culture. Therefore, my takeaway led me to ask questions to create understanding.
So good.
Thank you, Rian. You're a hero for coming to 2 Duzie Lives today. Matt says, my takeaway from today is that honestly in communication, I really like the spoon conversation idea.
Very helpful.
Try it. Sometimes we use a pen if we don't have a spoon or a stick or whatever.
A knife is not healthy in those moments.
Jacob says, as a 16-year-old, the video on adolescence was really interesting. I'd never heard it talked about in that way with the concept of pruning.
Very, very true.
Yeah, in my age and stage, Jacob, I absolutely loved that video as well. It spoke to reasons for why we specialize, why we maybe can't remember, and it also speaks to the focus that I currently need right now and let go of those things that don't need to stay. We talked in previous weeks about the roads in our brain, and I think I love the way this guy did a video on it.
There is a video we were looking for, and I couldn't find it. There's a video where a guy actually talks about how in the midst of a lot of that conflict between that generation gap is actually a generation gap of the brain. Yeah. Because God has made us at certain ages to start distancing ourselves, preparing to someday leave. And it's a brain function that many times we don't understand. We think, well, your culture is this or your whatever is this, but literally the brain is changing and causing this to happen. And the one who made the brain is God. And so it's a very interesting thing that God has created.
Yeah, and Matt Taylor, thanks. He loved the backstage transition, by the way.
Thank you.
The turning around effects were seamless. I thought it was kind of like a cool dance move.
So good.
34 years, you know, and then you can have seamless backstage transitions too.
So true.
Or maybe not. And Dale says this might be an interesting place to explore Maslow. Yeah, help us with that.
Yeah.
And Matt's cheering on Reman. And Roseanne says, my takeaway, I found the video about the adolescent very interesting also. The story of Nadine was really interesting to hear. So Nadine, thank you for being so vulnerable
thank you very much.
Open. I also want to have a huge thank you. I'm a big fan of Nadine, and I really appreciate her just coming in and just, Nadine, you are so from the heart, and I felt like we were just sitting right there in, I guess maybe it was your bedroom or your living room, wherever you were. I just felt like I was right there with you. And you always have that touchable piece every time we have a conversation. And I think anytime you have an interaction, that's one of your superpowers. I love that. Roseanne said, I agree with you, Jacob, as an 18-year-old. He liked that too. And Jess says, to remember to be patient with myself and my mom. Not to put pressure on either of us. We're both learning.
That's right.
Thank you, Jess, for that reminder. We hear you. Yeah. Any other questions, comments, emotional outbursts? What would you like more conversation about? Obviously, boy meets unsaved girl or whatever. Boy meets girl, next gen, connections, and having unbelieving friends were our top three.
We had this morning, someone also brought up LGBT relationship with someone. There's a few other ones that came in there. So we're looking at maybe going the whole month of June into these areas of unique relationships because people aren't talking about them, and we need to.
Yep. And Dale says, that is true. Always remember the adult so-called brain is not developed until age 25 to 28. That's true. So you're still pruning it. And even the thing that I love about our brains is they have what's called neuroplasticity. So we can make new roads all the time. We're never stuck, but the development of it, of course, we're influenced by our past. And I love that we're always in development. We're always changing depending on our focuses and our pruning and our choices. Paolo says, clarity makes us move faster and to a common place where honesty, vulnerability, and respect
so true
to move forward. Thank you for that. That is very powerful. Clarity does make that difference. And Nadine says, thanks to each of you for listening to me and listening to me share. Even during sharing, I could realize more of what has been and what is happening. Nadine, I'd love to know, if you don't mind writing it, what new awareness do you have about your relationship with yourself and your parents?
Yeah, that's good. Anyone else? Any other questions, thoughts, comments, cucumbers?
Emotional outbursts. Did you say that? Celebrations, or maybe you want another poll or just a poll sound. There's the poll sound. Great question. Bye, Neil. Thank you for joining us. Keep giving your handful of friends the link and jump in with us. We appreciate it. We'll try to catch you this week. Zoe says, thank you, guys. I love the part when Nadine said and Susie emphasized that you can talk to other people, God, to understand things, conflicts. And you don't have to be as close to your parents in the way you may think or want. Giving grace to yourself and your parents. Things take time.
So true.
Oh, yeah, it is true. And I think that was an awareness for me as well. We think that everything has to be contained in the home, or everything has to be contained in this relationship or that relationship. And there is such value having multiple people. I think that's why the community net concept is so important for all of us to live fully alive.
I remember one time I was working with a young man whose father had died, and there were so many things that he had to tell his father, but his father was gone. And he came to me and he says, can I just talk to you as if you were my father and just bring these things out? And it was as if he had that conversation that he could never have. Sometimes it's not necessary that we have to have the conversation with that person, but maybe with someone else who can dialogue with us. That could also be very helpful.
Yeah, that's great. Nadine said, listen first, then speak. It's an important one for us. Good awareness, Nadine. Thank you for sharing that. Matthew says, okay, question following Paolo's comment. What have you found works to bring clarity into a conflict you've had? Great question, Matt. I think that's going to be over to you. What have you found brings clarity to a conflict?
The first thing that comes to my mind is listening. And listen, and listen, and listen. Because conflict is there, because there's a miss. Something's happening like this. So the position I would normally take is I want to listen and not try to put this if I was in your shoes, because I'm never going to be in Susie's shoes or someone else's shoes.
Your feet are too
really
big.
Listen, what is the story that she is telling herself? And this, I don't think there's a conflict right now in our house that we don't come back to that. Okay, stop for a moment. What's the story you're telling yourself? And
what's that internal speak?
We don't even know that. And so we have to step back. And when we realize what we are hearing and we're able to articulate that is something that really has brought clarity to us.
Right. And when you're going down there where you're facing the fear, many times Dan asks me or others, what are you afraid of? Because we're motivated by either fear or desire. So desire propels us forward, and fear has a number of responses. It could be fight, flight, freeze, or fall. So many times when I feel frozen or stuck, or you just can't move, or you feel like that conversation or that moment or even that relationship can't move, that might be a version of fear, because you are just frozen in that space. So if we can identify what we're afraid of, and like in my example, I was afraid of being left behind, or Dan's moving too fast, or he's not catching up with me. And we found a way. I don't need to be afraid of that. We just decided to have more touch points. We call them powwows. We call them, you had a new name for something today, a huddle. So we try to eat all of our meals together, and we're moving so fast in life that our meal time is our time to touch base. And that's one of the things that we said we just want to put more emphasis on. And that helped dispel my fear, and his caring heart and speaking the truth to me allowed me to be in a safe enough space to let go of that fear and to have communication and understanding.
I wish you could have been here for lunch today, because we were doing lunch and the conversation was moving towards unclarity.
And potential conflict.
We threw a piece of paper on the table with us, and we began to write, and we began to say things. And what do you think about this?
Diagramming,
and naming things, and
clarity.
Is there a website for that? We just all over the place.
It's all about clarity.
And like 10 minutes before this began, we were like, oh, wow.
That's it. And we bought a website
to support it. We're on the same page, and we're moving together. And sometimes that's what it takes. You just clear everything, and let's get to the bottom of who we are and where we are and what's happening in our brains.
So I think that clarity is so important. And if we don't know how to get clarity, sometimes this is where mediation is important. You and your parents are having this struggle. Bring a neutral, peacemaking person into the mix to help each other understand what they're saying. We've been in a mediation situation many times between parents and children, just helping them understand each other's perspective.
We were sort of a spoon in the room.
Yeah.
Okay, now it's your turn.
Okay, stop, you go, yeah. And Rian says, I've challenged myself to ask these questions and differences to my parents, even though it's different to what they are used to get to know them deeper to create clarity in how we as a family live together.
So good.
Wow, Rian, do it. That's a really big deal because you come from a culture where your dad is the top one, and everybody respects the dad, and what dad says goes. So,
only one lion in the house.
Yeah, that's the African way, isn't it? So that's amazing. Rian, let us know how that's going. We'll be praying for you in that. But clarity is such an important thing. Wow. And Dale said that's why mindfulness and awareness is so important as part of our personal awareness.
So true.
That's right, that we are mindful. And one of the things we've been trying to be mindful in the last few weeks here on Duzie Live is all about our own emotions, because emotions are information for us to understand ourselves. Identify those emotions like Nadine did earlier on, and then you can see what they are and move forward with that as well.
That sounds like electric lunch. It was. It was
so good.
We know within the Fully Alive Revolution, there are these 12 things that need to take place, but we have not been able to connect the dots. We have not been able to name certain things. We have these two things right here, but how do they connect? And it was like,
we were mind mapping, we were funneling, we were arrowing, we were like, oh yeah, and what should this be called?
And
how could this look like? And what should we do to make that happen better? It was just like, whoa, it was definitely electric.
I would call it a thrive culture.
Oh.
It was a thrive culture there around the table.
Listen to that. Thriveculture.live is our new website. Coming soon. Coming soon. You pull it out there so we can do it. It's so exciting.
Thrive culture.
Zoe has to go. Thanks again, Zoe. Bless you. And keep being with your parents and others of us who are involved in your life. We love you.
Well, thank you, all of you, for coming. If there's anything else, we can hang on. But if that's it, we can also finish.
Yeah, we can definitely finish.
I don't know if you know this, but while we were
not live yet,
there was a storm just outside the window. And it has now passed, so that's good. We can go outside.
Matt, is it live yet? No, it's not live because we pushed the button to buy it, and then we ran over here to this screen. So
we really were trying to define
the
whole idea of fully alive. People are like, what does that mean? And we talk about fully alive and love fully. And what does that mean? And the word that really came from it was thrive, to really thrive. And how do we grow that culture of thriving? And so that would be where we're heading, probably in our podcast and in probably more in this platform and others. So
what do you think of thrive culture?
Thrive culture.
Matt said there's also a storm inside Duzie Live. Woo! Yeah, it's true. Would love your feedback now or later on what you think of thrive culture. For us, it has so many pictures and such clarity for us.
Right.
That's what we're trying to help people do in the Fully Alive Revolution, is helping people thrive.
People who come to Duzie Live and they're talking, you should go to Duzie Live, and people are going, what in the world is that?
What's a Duzie?
And so we've been trying to think, what is a word that would capture some of this thrive? People are talking about thriving and culture, and so we'll see. We'll juggle that a little bit.
Rian says, been in a storm for 2 days, nonstop wind and rain. Is that internally, Rian, or is that externally? Is that an internal conflict or an outside conflict?
If it's internal wind, you don't need to talk about it.
You already did. And then Joe says, leaked info. Thanks for the sneak peek.
There's more to come.
You're welcome. It's really exciting.
Watch this space.
And Nadine says, oh, wow, this is amazing. Send some. Something's brewing. Sounds cool. Of that rain to Jamaica, summer came early. Rian, how could you send some of that rain this way? The UK is asking for rain.
Sure.
Matthew, the representative of the UK,
speaking for everyone in the
is
UK.
Asking for it. Rahel, thank you so much for coming. You have a good night yourself. Thank you for joining us on this Duzie Live and all the others that you've been coming to. So this is one of
the phrases we've been working on.
Yeah. So your life is a remarkable story, an adventure that only you can create. May this chapter be a fully alive revolution as you love your life, your world, and your God.
In other words, may you live in a thrive culture.
That's right. That's right. So So we have been so grateful to have you here today on Duzie Live, and those of you who were live, and also those of you who are seeing it on the replay. We so appreciate you being here. If there's any way we can support you, or if you have any ideas or comments or concerns, send them our way. We love it.
I'm waiting for her to hand me the spoon because my name is Dan.
And my name's Susie.
Together we're a Duzie. Talk to you later.
Live fully and love fully.
Bye.
Bye.